about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up. But you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start my own nation with myself a reservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with myself a reservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
Welcome back. Hello.
John.
It's just so lovely to see you. Thank you. We've got Jane in the my bottom.
Hello.
Thank you so much. And Kerry, welcome back. Hello.
Are we muted?
Thanks, John.
Are we muted?
I think we might be muted.
Oh, I can hear you.
We can hear each other, but
on the live stream.
Maybe that.
Oh, okay. Maybe three women on one panel, we've jinxed it.
Oh.
We're okay. We're sort of we're working. I do understand that it's am I right in saying it's Paul Daly's birthday today?
Oh yeah, it is. Happy birthday, Paul. I seen that earlier on.
I think our boss it's certainly around here, and so happy birthday to our boss, and sort of hope you're having a great day. But the time is now, the place is here, and welcome to you. What did we call Justicios? To see our wonderful show tonight. Let's start. I have a moment of the week this week, but I'm going to leave it till last because it's too scary to all you'll be able to think about when I tell you will be what I've said. So let's go through and see what my wonderful guests have. Kirsty, your moment of the week.
So my moment of the week is a tweet that was sent out by Jeremy Vine. We believe that it's been taken down since. I don't have it on me to read the exact word. I don't know if you've got it on the screen to share it. But it was basically saying that there were too many people on benefits within the UK, too many disabled and sick people claiming benefits, and they should all get back to work in as many terms. So I think what we're seeing is another regurgitation of the Cameron years, aren't we? If everybody can cast their minds back to 2012, 2013, it was the scroungers and skivers, wasn't it? That was the big rhetoric of it, was all these people on benefits. Well, since then, we've seen benefits slashed, we've seen disability money slashed. People are struggling, you know, that are on benefits. And I think what we're going to see is another uprising of this benefit scaremongering. And I've noticed over the last 6 months, there's been an uprising in a few articles. I'm noticing that the public are starting to get back to that argument as well, which I think actually died down after COVID-19. I think it really hit working people that did find out that they had to rely on benefits because, you know, they couldn't get to work or whatever. I think it actually gave them some insight into what it's like when you are on benefits and what a struggle it is. I'm thinking maybe people are starting to forget what it was like for them in lockdown on benefits and what a struggle it was. And they're looking for somebody to blame because obviously we're in the cost of living crisis and you know, people need somebody to blame for this other than the government, obviously, or bad policy making. But I think the danger with the rhetoric of that, from a personal point of view, I've got multiple health issues. I'm currently not working. But what really annoys me is in 2012 and 2013, when the skivers and strivers rhetoric was coming out, I decided to strive. I was single mum with 3 kids on my own, not working. And I decided to go back into further education and be a striver. And actually what happened was I lost benefits because I went back to college and decided to be a striver. They cut half of my money because I decided to go back to college, So I don't know what the ideology behind this, but I'm assuming that they're running out of the migrant bashing. They're running out of the xenophobia bashing, or they're running out of the homophobic bashing, or the trans bashing and what have you. And we're just seeing a regurgitation of what was saying 2012, 2013. So
we need to keep an eye on that, because it's just that they just go around in a circle seeking scapegoats. For their own incompetence. Neil Terry, my political moment of the week was seeing the Tories not being happy with the COVID inquiry wanting unredacted documents, an inquiry they set up. Well done, absolutely typical. Jane, our moment of the week.
So it's not a very nice moment of the week, but in Uganda, where homosexuality has been illegal for some time, they've now imposed life imprisonment and the death penalty for same-sex acts, or what they've called aggravated homosexuality. So, which is just, in this day and age, just terrifying. And there's some brands who are starting to boycott Uganda. I just hope there can be enough pressure put on to get this turned around. But then there's what happens under the radar, because if this is accepted by the state, there's already reports of people being beaten up in the street and horrific violence. So on paper they might take that away, but it doesn't mean that it's safe for people to live their lives.
I'm worried, Jane, that we're seeing a rolling back on LGBTQ rights. The Nat Cons were very strong for a cis-het family set up and at the conference in London, I'll talk about with my moment of the week as well. Kerry, what's your moment of the week?
Well, it's more than a week, and I'm trying to be positive, because normally my moment of the week is beyond negative, but I'm trying to be positive. But I was actually on it, like, over the moon to be asked by Laura Daly to carry the women's banner at the Romanas Gala. That made me over the moon. So I'm trying to be a bit positive. So yeah, I hope my back puts it up, but yeah, I'm willing to do it.
We all have to suffer for the cause, Kerry. That's just great news, and congratulations. My moment of the week, just very briefly, is can you remember we talked about whether previous week about whether Trump was in trouble or not? And then I asked the question and if we get DeSantis instead, will that be a good thing or a bad thing? Arguably, the two of them is trying to outdo each other in horrendousness. DeSantis was on Fox News recently, and he says this: if he's elected, I will be able to destroy leftism in this country and leave woke ideology in the dustbin of history. So that's what we're looking at from a DeSantis presidency. You just want to give up all hope. Laura Lee, DeSantis leading us straight to Gilead, and that's absolutely a danger. I'll shut up now. Let's move on.
Now it's time for the big story.
I know my face appears in a little box on the screen, but when I go like this with my fingers pointing to the tech person to do the, can you actually see them, or am I just sort of going and for no apparent reason? There we go. Let's start off. This is one of the most complex problems that we've addressed on the show. It's massively difficult to get your head around, and there's a massive problem with it. It's crisis across the board. So here's my question. I'm going to start it with Jane. Jane, housing is a huge and complex problem, and we can all agree that the Tories have utterly failed to address it, never mind solve it. What are the issues, and what would you propose as solutions?
So I'm going to start off with renting, because the Renters Reform Bill has now finally, after 4 years, been announced and gone for its first reading in Parliament, I think last week. So I think back in 2019, the government promised that, amongst other things, they'd end Section 21 no-fault evictions, and they have finally got around to putting this through Parliament. So renting is a huge, terrible situation in this country, affecting the mental health and well-being of so many people, anyone who's unfortunate enough to think to be caught up in it. So in terms of certainly the private rental sector, and affordability is a huge thing. So whilst interest rates have, they're going up now, but whilst interest rates were below 1% for 10, 13 years, rents have been, going up year on year. Lots of landlords have been helping themselves to a nice big increase in the rent every year. And there's so many people who can't afford to live at all, who are living beyond their means, just to be able to keep a roof over their head, and not a nice roof. I think it's a quarter of people in private rented houses who their homes aren't fit, wouldn't meet the safer home standard. And there's been lots of reports on ITV over the last year about absolutely disgusting conditions in social housing as well. So what this does to people with the affordability is that people are just constantly worried and frightened that not going to be able to pay their rent, that their rent will go up, that they might end up homeless. And there have been a few reports out in the last week that private renters are twice as likely to end up in problem debt than people who aren't renting. So another big issue with this is lack of security. So the Section 21 no-fault evictions, this a no-fault eviction, it just means a landlord can ask you to leave your home. It doesn't matter if you've lived there for 30 years and you've paid your rent on time every day and you've been a model tenant and no one's ever said anything bad about you. They can just tell you to go because they want to do, often because they realise that the market rates have gone up, and rather than ask the tenant to pay more rent, they'll just chuck them out and put it on the market for twice as much. I've heard of that happening more times than I can think of. Or to sell the property. So this is obviously very bad for people's mental health in terms of security. People with children, often when this happens, and in fact I rent, and all of the people that I know that rent, including myself, have had to move at some stage because the landlords asked them to leave the property because they wanted to sell the property. So, which is the landlord's prerogative, but what people have found overwhelmingly is that market rents have gone up in the area even faster than the rent from their landlord, so that when they go to move, they find they can't stay in the area they were living in before, so they have to move somewhere else and pay even more rent to live in an even smaller place. And if you've got children, I read a really heartbreaking story in a local forum last year about a lady who'd been living in her house for many years, and one of her children is autistic, and she can't afford to live in this area anymore. Now her landlord's asked her to go, and this is going to cause her child so much distress, changing schools. It's really nasty for families. So the Renters Reform Bill does remove Section 21s. However, what it puts in instead is the right for the landlord to give the tenant 8 weeks notice if they decide that either they want to sell the property, which is the reason that everyone I know who's been through this has gone through it, so those people still would have gone through it, or if they want to either move in themselves or move in a family member. However, they don't have to provide any evidence that they're going to do this, and all they have to do is not put the house on the market or rent it out for 3 months afterwards. So as long as they don't do that, then they're fine, and they can just rent it out again and get the tenant out effectively on a no-fault eviction. And it's the onus is on the tenant to track this and report it to the local authority. So this isn't great. Pets are another issue. Pets are really good for mental health, and most renters can't have pets just because their landlords don't want them to have pets. It's too much. Part of it is because of the stupid way that the laws are written, so that even good landlords are frightened sometimes to let their tenants have pets. However, the Renters Reform Bill says it will address this by giving renters the right to request to have a pet, and that the request can't be unreasonably turned down. This has only been put out last week, and I've already seen one podcast advertised on YouTube with handy tips for landlords on how to get around with a reason that's not unreasonable. So there's no comeback on this. And the impact on people who just aren't able to settle into their community because they can't put down roots. They have to move from area to area whenever they have to move. You hear about people who've had to move several times in a couple of years through no fault of their own, just because they've rented places that their landlords then want to sell or do other things with. So what the Renters Reform Bill has put in is rolling tenancies, rolling 1 month tenancies, as opposed to the short hold assured tenancies we've got at the moment, where you sign up to a fixed 12 months. And that can be very problematic, because if you move into the property and find out that, you know, that it's riddled with damp, or that the landlord harassing you, or that any other number of things are wrong, or, you know, you can't just give notice to leave, you'd be obligated to pay the rest of the rent on that 12-month tenancy if you did. So that ties people into properties, you know, where they shouldn't be having to stay. So that will address that to a certain extent. But again, there's only a 6-month safety period before the landlord can implement this request for you to leave, so that they can sell or buy. So 6 months is the maximum amount of time you can really be sure you've got a roof over your head, even if you do everything right. And local authorities are being expected to enforce this. So the same local authorities that have been defunded over the last 13 years and had their budgets slashed, there's no talk of any extra funding for them to do this. And there was already an article in one of the I think it's the New Statesman, saying that local authorities don't have the resources, manpower, or expertise to do this. So there's gonna be a bit of a free removal where they can't enforce this. And what had also been promised to be in this legislation was a ban on the blanket bans on families with children, because that's another thing. If you're a renter, you can't have pets, you can't have children, you can't be ill and not work, you can't be claiming any sort of support from the state. So we had been promised that this would be taken out, and we had been promised that the Decent Home Standard would be brought into this, that there was some sort of minimum standard of living. However, there's just a note in the back saying that there's a commitment to this and they'll do it at the earliest opportunity. And you would think that the earliest opportunity is now in this piece of legislation. So they sound, perhaps they'll add that in, and I'm sure there'll be amendments, but that's really disappointing. So renting, not very nice.
Thank you, as always, an incredibly erudite and detailed description of the problem. We still remember just talking about one aspect of this problem. Just very briefly, Jane, I mean, what for you would be a solution to this?
Social housing. We need social housing. There isn't any other solution, I don't think.
Kirsty, have you any experience in the rental sector? I mean, what are your comments about what Jane has been talking about?
Yeah, so I've rented and had to, the first place I moved into on the first move, I was in it 2 months. It was awful. The landlord used to turn up every Sunday and be a bit of a creep. I couldn't get, it was loads of faults with the house that were covered up. And when I complained about it, he gave me 4 weeks notice and just said that he was selling the house and I had to get out. And luckily, I managed to move into another rental property, which again, on the surface looked great, but had damp, we had mold, there was gaps between the window, and the landlord just didn't want to put any money into the house to sort it out. And we've ended up moving again. But because of that, my children have had to move schools twice, 2 primary schools, and it really upskittled them of having to make new friends, having to lose old friends. And I think the solution to it is it's a landlord's market out there, isn't there? You know, if we had enough housing, that would put pressure on these landlords that they would have to have reasonably priced, decent housing, or people wouldn't move into them, would there? I mean, an example this week, I've been supporting somebody who's looking to move, and they were looking at a 2-bedroom property that was first put up for £675 a month. And then the next day, for some reason, the rent had gone up on it to £850 a month. And he contacted me and said, how is this possible? And I said, I bet they got so much interest in the one at 675 that they thought, wow, we're asking too little for this property. And an 850 in my area is really high for a 2-bedroom terraced house.
Very fine.
You know, 1 bathroom, 2-bedroom. So I agree with Jane. You know, we need more affordable, we need more social housing. And I think also we need to be looking at other places. And like, I don't know if anybody else's area, but in my area, there's loads of empty spaces above shops, I've noticed. There's like faded nets and a bit of a faded, you know, a box. And I'm wondering, well, what space is above these shops? Is there where we can be looking at, you know, a more environmentally friendly way of actually looking at where we can make properties, whether they're flats or bedsits or whatever, you know, in these already buildings that aren't being used? If that makes sense.
We looked into this at Durham County Council for a while, and we were assured that it was much harder at renting these spaces than you might think, that they were town centres. And I can't remember what the specific argument was, except that it was a problematic place, both in terms of the kind of tenants that you got there, but also in the experience of the tenants living in a town centre. And they just couldn't rent them when they did them. But apart from just building 5 million houses in the next 4 years, it has to be tempting to look at places we can use as rental places. Kerry, have you any thoughts of about the rental sector and what we should be doing?
I live in a social housing association, and believe you me, these issues are not just in the private sector. They're far from in the private sector. I've lived in my house 14 years now, and it took a little boy to die a few months ago for them to actually not fob their tenants off to say it is damp and it is mould, it's not just condensation. And it took a child to die for a housing association to up the game. And my housing association is terrible, and it's as worse as a private landlord is, definitely. And it's really, really bad. And I think that the worst thing many local authorities in this country did was sell off council houses to these private housing associations. And I genuinely do. And I still call my house a council house, but it's not a council house, it's a housing association. But that is the worst thing in the world that they ever did. And it's like going from coast to country. It was a small, like, private company when I got my house, and I've got an old school tenancy, and I don't want my tenancy changing, and I refuse to have it changed because I'm still in my house. But you get beyond a joke, as I call them, beyond housing, and they are beyond a joke. And they don't listen to you. You get these people who just come and fob you off, who think you're gormless and thick. Oh, well, that's not this and that's not that. And people believe that being in a social housing house is better than a private landlord, where my current landlord is getting as bad as a private landlord.
And the answer is council housing, social landlords. And when, mind you, I think I'm right in saying that little boy died. He was in a council property.
Yeah, he was. He was in. I think he was in a social housing association property, and I think the parents were like association,
but it wasn't a council house. It was a housing association. But whatever. We need regulation. I'm going to go back to Jane, and we're going to continue talking about housing, because so far we've only talked about problems in the rental sector. But one thing I know that you're increasingly angry about, Jane, is the situation as regards leasehold. Do you want to talk to us about the problems facing leaseholders at the moment?
Yeah, so I don't know. I didn't used to know anything about leasehold. I didn't understand what leasehold and freehold meant. There was a time when I thought that maybe me and my husband might be able to buy a home of our own one day. And at that time, obviously, the thing that would have been available to us was, the cheapest possible property, which is a flat. But looking into it, what you get when you buy a flat, what the freehold would mean everything's yours. The leasehold is what you get with a flat, which means that it's not all yours. On top of your rent, on top of your mortgage that you're paying for your flat, you've got someone who's renting out the communal areas, and you have to pay additional charges to them. You have no control about what they do to those areas, what they spend the money on. I've had friends who lived in flats who had to pay really large service charges to the people in these communal areas, and nothing ever got done because the landlord would keep on saying, oh, there's one person out of the whole flat who won't pay their money, so I can't do anything. So it's really an awful situation. It's not this, they don't have this system in mainland Europe. This is, of course, an English feudal thing, a hangover from our feudal past. And Michael Gove had committed to abolishing this. He'd said he thought it was unfair and it needed to be abolished, but it seems that he's had pressure put upon him by other people in the Conservative Party, and they've quietly dropped that pledge in the last few weeks, which is really sad. So this, it's just making it harder for those at the bottom who are able to buy. And shared ownership as well. Peter Apps of Inside Housing magazines put some stuff out today that was really interesting about shared ownership, and he put a statement from someone who they had this man and his partner had gone to purchase a shared ownership property, and they'd worked out they could afford to get, I think, 45% of the property, and then according to that percentage there's a deposit they pay. But they went to the assessment and they were told, no, you can't have 45% because that's too affordable for you. You have to have 55%, which means you'll pay obviously more for the mortgage and need a bigger deposit, which means you're overstretched, which means there's no give, and you're subject to the mortgage increases after the first few years. And also a lot of these places are flat, so then you've got service charges coming in from the communal areas that are completely out of your control. So even the shared ownership market, I have heard people say positive things about it, but there was some really terrible stories about the way people are treated in shared ownership properties, and terrible situations that people end up in through shared ownership. So it's it's the people who aren't wealthy, the people at the bottom of the pile just trying to survive, whether you're renting or buying. It's just not a fair housing market.
Leasehold, when I was first buying my first house, which was 1978, it was you didn't really bother, because what happened was that you bought on a 999-year lease. It still had 800 years to run, and there was these sort of people who owned it, but they'd been forgotten. Who nobody knew who they were. There was no money to pay to them, and you just got on as though it was your house. And those houses were cheaper, and so they were therefore more attractive. What's happened in the last few years is that it's been discovered that this can be a cash cow with ground rents and service charges and horrific. And I would point out that Gove's backtracked under pressure. The Labour Party is only promising to stop leasehold on new built properties, on properties built from when it makes the law. And so there's this backlog of people trapped, and some of them have to do silly things like, if they want to do any decorating in the house, or they want to change a light plug or renew the electrics, they're prepared to pay for it, but they have to ask permission. It's horrific. I'm going to just quickly, Kirsty or Kerry, have you anything to say about leasehold? Because we have one aspect of housing that we need to go to, but we're running out of time. Have you anything to say, Kerry? Leasehold.
That's why I was saying I don't want to get rid of my old tenancy agreement with the good company Coast and Country, because I've got basically I moved into my house and it's mine until I want to move out of it, even though it's like a social housing house. But if I went on a beyond a joke tenancy now, it's only my house for so many years. So that's why I don't want my tenancy changing. I always get the wording wrong. Is it a long hold tenancy that I've got? So basically my house is my house until I move out of it.
So much of the issue with the rental market is that it doesn't give people a home. It merely gives them a house. And it's a temporary area. And one of the facts about this is that the poorer the area you live in, the faster the turnover of tenants. And so you never get a chance to establish a community, a
See, I have, and that's why I don't want to do my tenancy. I've lived in my house for 14 years.
spot
So
on.
that's why I don't want to like change
When
it.
you have a fixed tenancy, then sort of you get to know your neighbours,
Yeah.
sort of the person that you help each other's out. There are people who've lived there all their lives, and sort of when somebody new moves into the area, they look around and say, "Whoa, this is how we behave."
I mean, I've just had to mute myself there because my next door but one neighbour's brought my escapee cat back all the time. And he brings it back all the time. So I had to mute myself there. And I was like, this, like when we answer, the kids answer the door, so the dogs are barking. And he brings me cat back, so it escapes all the time.
So we've talked about this before, Kerry. This is the reality of life. So the people watching us face the reality. Some really good comments people making. Mark Lungley, we need Acorn the Union or the London Renters Union. You can join that. I am corrected. The Rochdale thing was a housing association. Please forgive me for misspeaking. Jacqueline Hemmings. Building upon our complaints about the transitory nature of it, and on Kerry's points about the poorness of checks that go on. Thank you very much. Very briefly, Jane, talk to us about the problems in house building and the absolute numbers of houses available.
I think we're heading towards the lowest housing stock being built since the end of the Second World War, is just reading. And another promise that Michael Gove has backtracked on is that he had committed to the building of 300,000 houses a year. And he's backtracked on that because of pressure from people in the Conservative Party again, and it's just an optional now for local authorities to do that. But I don't know if Kirsty wanted to come back in there.
No, I was just going to say just something that came into my mind about that, the shared ownership. I don't know if this is the rules across the board, but I used to support a lady who had gone into the shared ownership of it was like a housing association house. It was on a row of housing associations. And the trouble she had is she couldn't actually move. She couldn't actually put the house up for sale or get any of her money out because it was up to the other shareholders with it. And they just said no, that she couldn't move. So I think that's just a little pip of the downfall of it. Of once you're in there, you could be stuck and not be able to move or downsize. So that was just where my mind was.
The answer, Jane?
I really think it's council housing. Everyone needs a home that they can feel safe in. They need to know that there's a roof over their head in a safe place where they can stay for as long as they need to stay, and that when they're not there anymore, the people they care about will be safe to stay in that place as well. It's so important, and they need to know that they can afford to stay there whatever happens, and if they get ill or something happens to them, they're still going to have that safe roof over their head. And there is so much benefit for the whole community, for all of society through that. It's not just for the individual, it's for everyone's benefit to do this.
Just closing this up quickly, and please forgive me for drawing it to a rapid close, but we have two more topics to talk about. Labour Housing Group, they just put something out. I'm not tremendously impressed by Labour Housing Group, but they put out a book which argues that housing is a right. And they look at the whole problem through the prism of the fact that we have a right to housing, in the same way as we have a right to equality and political rights and economic rights. We have social rights in terms of housing and other issues like that. And it was really quite interesting, but a huge read. Read the introduction. But the one that you need to watch, people, look up the Labour campaign for council housing. And what they argue is that all the promises by both the parties, but including Labour, the promises about home ownership and their promises about the rental market conflict with each other. And they can't do one if they're going to do the other. They're making these promises to these different groups of people unaware. And the only answer they argue is what Jane just said. It's council housing. Let's move on. from one incredibly complex thing to another incredibly complex thing, which we're going to accomplish in quarter of an hour, everybody. So Kirsty, tell us about the energy price cap. It's going down. Is this good news for people?
Well, on the service, so from the 1st of July, the government guarantee ends, but it should be starting again, which is a good thing in a way, because if Ofgem actually set the cap, so the government did it so that they could set the cap, and it was at £2,500 as we are now. If Ofgem had been in control of that cap, it could be as much as £5,000 a year on our energy bills, from one of the data sources I found. So from the 1st of July, it should go down. The numbers are looking at about 1,976, which is about £600 less than what we're paying at the moment, but they are going to rise again towards next winter, and rise again up until around £2,045. So a little bit less of what we've been paying, but still more than what we were paying post-COVID, before COVID. So it will be coming down for a bit, but then it will be going up again, but not at the levels that we've been at, if that makes sense. So it is good news of it is slowly coming down. However, the problem is we are one of the UK, we pay the most worldwide for our energy supplies. And part of the reason for that is actually our housing, going back to housing as well, is we don't insulate our housing like other European countries are. And there's no funding to put that insulation into making houses less leaky, so to speak. Another thing is that 85% of our households use gas boilers, which isn't the same for other European countries. And the other big issue is that 40% of our electric is actually generated through gas-fired power stations. So we've got to get the gas for that as well. So on how to bring it down, the other argument is, I mean, Sharon Graham's come out and said, actually, Ofgem aren't fit for purpose, that British Gas aren't fit for purpose. British Gas made £3 billion profit this year. And this is because instead of energy companies taking this rise, so to backtrack, the rise that we're seeing is a mixture of a lot of things. It is to do partially with the war in Ukraine. It is partially to do because of COVID, and it is partially because we're in a cost of living crisis. We've got all these things going on at the same time that are putting pressure on our energy prices. But Sharon Graham at Unite has come out and said it's absolutely not fit for purpose, that these companies are still making billions of profit because they are passing the increase in energy prices onto the customer instead of taking it from their profit. So it's greedy capitalism at the end of the day. It's capitalism on steroids, and we know where it came from. It's come from Thatcher and privatisation. And the most annoying thing is we've got companies in sort of France and Germany that own our energy companies, and the profits are actually going into their countries because they're state-owned. It's going back in there. So it's not even as if we are generating money to come back into our economy, which would help our inflation rate, which is also another reason why prices are going up, because we've got sky-high inflation rates as well. So I looked at a little bit of the LSE British Politics and Policy website, had some quite interesting information. And they were saying, yeah, it is Ukraine that are squeezing the gas supplies in Europe and causing the wholesale prices to go up. But it is so high to us is because of the state of our housing. So one solution could be we need a campaign to get better insulation in houses so that it would bring down our bills, is one way we could solve the problem. But they were also highlighting how this is affecting businesses as well, especially small businesses, independent businesses that are seeing their energy bills going up. And that's bad for us in a way, because they're either going to have to raise the price on the products that they're selling, or they're going to have to make redundancies within their company. So either way, it is still us, the consumer, or us as the workers, that are going to feel the hit from it. But they did come up with some really good solutions of how we could bring it. And that was practical things like changing your boiler system and turning it down, which we've all heard before, installation, which I've gone through, but also the creation of zero carbon homes as well, which would link into our dream for better social housing. You know, if we're going to do this big social in our world, if we had the, you know, the magic wand to do it, would be actually creating zero carbon homes, which are really popular across Europe as well. We're really behind with other European countries that are moving towards this way of house building. And the big one is renewable energy as well, where we need to be putting money into wind power and solar power. But every time it seems that we make steps to do this, like solar paneling and farmlands, apparently there's going to be some new policies that are going to come in to put a ban on that. So the government are looking at, they would look to put a ban on solar farms being put on agricultural land. So if we're to believe that we're struggling for space for housing and space for food growing and stuff, we'd have to look at how we could get around that as well. To bring down the prices. But they are, I mean, I did read one statistic that that it will drop from July to under 2,000 and then it will rise again to just over 2,000. But things aren't expected to get any better before the end of the decade. So realistically, we could be looking at another 7 years of this, of sky high energy costs. I mean, they're the practical ways that we can get around things, but you've got to look at, you know, other places in Europe that are buying their gas cheaper than what we're getting it as well. I mean, Brexit has really put like a damper on this, because we used to collectively buy our energy, didn't we? Through the EU, we could collectively buy it. And now we're outside of that system. We're actually getting charged a little bit more than other European countries. So I mean, I was never a Brexiteer. I thought it was a bad idea from the start. So it was just another little, you know, and then on the other side of it, if people are getting into debt with their bills, and I know this personally, where I had to, when I had my back injury, I had to stop working and I was only getting £360 a month in statutory sick pay for a few months while they sorted out benefits and stuff for myself. And I got in debt with my gas and electric. And I actually said to them, look, this is what I can afford to pay. I can't afford to pay the 150, but I can afford to pay the 100. And because their computer system wouldn't accept the level that I was offering, that debt just kept getting bigger and I kept getting charges on it. So I was paying the £100 I could afford, but the £50 that I couldn't afford was accumulating as a debt. And they were actually putting interest on that debt as well, which I didn't know at the time, and sending out letters and then charging me for the letters because they were hand delivered. So every time somebody hand delivered me a letter to say I was in debt, it cost me another £30 and was put onto my bill. So in the end, I ended up owing about £2,000 in the end, even though I was paying the £100 a month and a bit more when I could. So we ended up with the bailiffs at my house, and they were really rude. They were really aggressive. They were really, really rude. And I got quite upset and said, look, I've been trying to pay this bill, but the computer said, no, I don't want to be on a meter because I knew it would cost me more. I knew that it's an absolute nightmare. I don't know. Are you on meters, Kerry? They're an absolute nightmare, aren't they? You know, if you're not checking.
No, I don't agree. I don't agree.
See, I found it more expensive being on the meters than what I was paying for my bill.
I don't agree. I like prepayment meters. I know where I am. I don't agree with that. Like, although, yeah, direct debit might be cheaper, but for me, budgeting wise, prepayment meters are the best for me. And my company, I can genuinely, I'm with Utilita, I've been with them since smart meters came out, and I can genuinely not fault my energy provider. I cannot.
Yeah. See, I was paying about £220 a month for both my gas and electric when I was doing it monthly by direct debit. And then now I've gone on to meters. I mean, through the winter, I know we've had the increase, but my gas on its own was £300 a month. That was just for my gas through my meter, because my house isn't insulated and I don't have carpets either, which I think is it's sucking the life out of what I am using. But it was the way the bailiff turned up, and I got upset, and he actually did the flat screen TV thing at me. When he walked through the living room, he went, "Oh, well, you've got your flat screen TV," as if these things are a massive...
Why did you let him in?
Oh, you know what? I could have laid him out. I would have got arrested for what I really could have. Because they barged, they knocked on the door, I opened it, and he was in with his friends. There was no, there was no messing. And they installed the meters, and obviously made the comment about the TV, which I'd actually bought while I was working, not that it was any of his business. So yeah, I've not. But going back to what we're turning off, Jem.
I'm going to intervene, Kirsty, at this point.
Yeah.
Some comments. Neil Terry, people on the lowest incomes will be hit the hardest by this. What's happened is that the government has withdrawn their £66 a month that they were giving. So even though the price has come down, people are going to be worse off this winter than they were last winter. Just very briefly, Kerry, have you got a comment to make about this topic, about the energy price cap?
I do. I think that it's obviously, surprise, 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 it's going to affect the poor the most, isn't it? I mean, when you get Rishi Sunak changing the national grid so he can eat his heated swimming pool, seriously, they're on a different planet. This government, they have not got a clue in any way, shape or form.
And Jane, last comment.
I think the one word we've not used is nationalisation here. I think nationalisation is a really important thing. Ofgem are looking at increasing the cap on how much profit energy companies to make. So any element of profit, if you nationalise, they're looking at increasing it so they can take more profit. They think this is an appropriate time to do that. That's what they're looking at. So take the profit out of it and use it to lower people's bills and to invest in infrastructure. And I just want to say about meters, I see there's two sides of it, but for me, meters, I've been on meters before, and I will always associate it with the lights going out, with the fridge going off for someone who's got insulin in it. I know there's a budgeting side to it, but no one should ever be put in the position in the first place where they're having to budget to the extent where they have to choose whether they can have heat or light in the house.
Thank you so much. What amazing comments, and really we could have gone talking about this a lot longer. Thank you for drawing our attention to the real meaning of this in terms of the suffering of people who are trying to cope with this situation. I've just got two very brief comments to make. One, it's an absolute scandal what's going on. The government is just pouring money into the hands of the power companies, and in the meantime, people, I think, being warm enough is a right. I think Kirsty's absolutely correct to draw our attention to the need for insulation and the better, more efficient heating system. But also this damping that when you get into debt, it increases, the pressure increases on you. It doesn't reduce. Thank you so much for your comments. Our last topic, which I'm just Kirsty and Jane, you might need to steel yourself, but you're not going to get a chance to say anything about this. We're running out of time.
What are you trying to say about me, John?
No, I'm just trying to say that you've only got 10 minutes, and I know that you're highly motivated about this. Talk to us about Kerry, talk to us about free school meals. They've been in the news this week. What's going on with free school meals, and what's your comment about it?
Well, I did read an article today about a Sunderland MP, Sharon Hodgson. I can never say her name. She was brought up on free school meals, and she's actually asking the Labour Party to make it part of their manifesto for the next general election. With all due respect, that should be in one of the highest priorities for a Labour Party, especially in our region. Universal free school meals for all school primary children should be a thing, massive big thing. It's like
interrupting you, Kerry. Why should children whose parents can well afford to pay for their lunches, what is the argument that says that they ought to have free school meals? I'm absolutely.
It's the stigmatisation of children who receive free school meals. They get stigmatised. They get labelled. I remember when I was a kid at school, right, and we used to get these little sticks at what number you were in. And if you were at school and you received free school meals, you got this stick. So you had to go to a different queue to your counterparts. And I think that all primary school children should be receiving a free school meal. And regardless of how much your parents earn or whatever.
Carrie, you've muted yourself. You've muted yourself. Now.
Sorry, my hands are gone too busy, John.
Carry on.
I think that there's the stigmatisation with free school meals and kids' dinners at school. But I think that every child should be equal in school. I mean, hasn't Sadiq Khan done it in London, universal free school dinners for primary school kids? Don't Scotland get it? And hasn't, I might be wrong here, but hasn't Wales attempted to do it or doing it? Why? Yeah, and I just think that where I'm from Grangetown in Middlesbrough, like one of the most deprived areas. And I think that that's what's caused a lot of hate from parents towards UC claimants in receipt of free school meals. And I've dealt with the abuse online, as you all know. And I think that I get why people get upset about kids receiving free school meals. I couldn't afford, God, how much are school dinners these, between 10 and 15 quid a week. And I think that a child in primary school is at the most developmental stage in their whole entire lives. It sets them up for life. So you can't only have free school dinners from reception to year 2, key stage 1. It should be continued. Like, our kids are literally like sponges at their age. And if you want them to achieve and everything in life, that people kind of, like, I've seen, not from my school, but articles of kids aren't being fed because they haven't paid the free school. Like that woman the other week with the curly hair, that big woman, like the headmistress, sending people to isolation because the parents haven't paid for the dinners. What is all that about? And that infuriated me, and it really infuriated me. And that woman calls herself a good religious person. She's absolutely full of Tory tosh, and she infuriates me. Sorry, John. I haven't swore that I've been taking good, John.
All rants. Brilliant.
Kerry, you wanted to plug a group. You wanted to
I did. I mean, just to add on to that, I'd go one step further and say it should be all the way through to secondary school, and it should be universal, every child, because I think actually people in work, when they realise that children only get £2.30 a day, and it's actually the quality and the price of the school, of the food that's in the school, it's really highly priced when you look at it. And a lot of the kids are having to take in extra money to top up that free school meal entitlement because it's just not enough. So I think that
come back in there, John.
Yes, you can, Kerry.
My daughter, like, and my son previously, he's now in college. My daughter's in secondary school in the receipt of free school meals. And if something goes up in price at the school, they still get the same amount of money. My daughter's come home from school one day and said, Mum, I couldn't get a drink because I'd used my budget.
Yeah.
How is that right? And not allowing a child to have a drink with their school meal at school?
Yes.
How is that right?
It's not right. I mean, just to plug what I've been involved with the group. It's called Disabled. I'll put a link in the bottom of this. But it's basically a group that are looking it's for children that have got disabilities that maybe have sensory issues or anxiety issues, and they cannot access their free school meal within school. It also goes on.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like what the point I'm trying to make, I mean, I've got a SEND child, but the point I'm trying to make is this is a universal issue regardless of special educational needs. You get able, like normal children at school whose parents can't, not normal, God forgive me, that's the wrong word to say it, I don't mean it like that, but you're getting parents who are under this pressure cooker already in life with gas, electric, food and everything like that, and they're missing the threshold by 10 pence, and they're having to pay £12 to £15 a week for school dinners. And I cannot imagine that mentally, and I think it's all wrong. But if we took our kids out if we took our kids out and we were paying for school dinners for a week and got fined off the local authority, we would still have to pay for them school dinners.
Yeah. But I think the argument they're making is sometimes these children are on roll at the school, but they're not actually even going to the school. So what's happening is you've got a large bunch of children that aren't accessing their free school meal, aren't at school to access their free meal.
Yeah, because there's that much stigmatisation to it. Kids are embarrassed in this day and age.
But that school is still getting the funding for it, and they're still getting the pupil premium as well. So if a child is on free school meal, the school automatically get extra funding through the pupil premium as well. And our point was, well, if that child's not getting ET, or they're not able to access the school through whatever reason, whether it's disability or if they're on reduced timetables, that money is allocated for that child's food. So what we've been pushing for is for the free school meal vouchers that were allocated through lockdown, you know, when we got the vouchers online at £15 a week, to be issued to the parents. So I've actually managed to do this. I've got a SEND child who's got food sensory issues. And the food at school got so bad that she was going hungry, and I couldn't afford to keep sending her with the pack up. It was just becoming a real financial stress on me. So I approached the school and said, well, what is happening to that free school meal money that you're getting? You know, that's £60 a month that's going into your funding that's meant to feed my child, and she's not getting fed. And the campaign's gathering quite a lot of family have been able to get that free school meal voucher back paid. So if their child has been enrolled but hasn't been able to get into school for a year, they've had as much as £600 worth of vouchers back paid for their child's free school meals.
I totally get that, and good for that initiative. But I think that when we're on here, we need to think of the bigger picture of all families and all children. And I think that.
And just
Thank you, girls. Thank you. That's wonderful of you.
Sorry, John.
No. I knew it was going to be terrifying today.
I just want to say, you can get bursaries for 16 to 18-year-olds online as well.
That's the best discussion we've had for a long time, by the way. I'm just going to ask, move to let Jane make the last comment, very brief, please, Jane. It strikes me, Jane, that a good diet and being properly fed is key to a child's intellectual and physical development, and sort of everything depends on them being properly nourished in those early years. And it's a no-brainer for me that we have free school meals as a universal part of education. I'll let you finish off, Jane.
I agree with Kirsty. I think it should be absolutely for secondary and primary school children, and I think it's fantastic that Tower Hamlets in East London has just announced that they're going to introduce free school meals for secondary school children as well. They've already got it for primary school children. And on the means testing argument, because it comes up again and again, it costs money to process applications and means test. It costs money you could have just spent on the additional meals for the children, so that you can just give all the children the same benefits. And it's an investment in the future, and you're going to see the benefits in the community, in the children, in their future. And also you're probably going to see savings in the local police service, health and mental health services, and you're going to see families who might have broken under the pressure, not quite breaking, and managing to stay together and support each other in their networks. So this really needs to happen.
Thank you. Wow. Brilliant today, wasn't it? I mean, for goodness sake, you weren't absolutely captivated today by what the guests have been saying. So, first of all, thank you to my guests. Thank you, Kirsty. Say goodbye.
Thank you, John. Bye.
So, Jane.
Bye.
Kerry.
Hi, John. You've done well with 3 women.
I know, sort of. I knew number 4 in this lineup. Just ask you, join Socialist Think Tank, please. Please go and buy some of the merchandise. You can make a donation if you want. Absolutely vital element of independent media, media which is not controlled by the big bosses, but can come on with fabulous content like we've had tonight, and fabulous guests like we've had tonight. And so I'm now...
John's the only boss on here.
And I'm now going to say goodbye, and we're all going to say goodbye, and hopefully the person in charge of technology will close us all down. Goodbye. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. God bless.
Keep the red flag flying here.